After you end isolation, avoid travel until a full 10 days after your first day of symptoms. So if you're someplace other than home, this is gonna be a problem. It is Friday, January 7th, 2022, and we survived quarantine. Hello everybody, I'm Morgan from the Very Unofficial Travel Guides. I travel all around the world to popular and not so popular tourist destinations to give you a very unofficial look at what it was like to be there, and I'm also the author of the book, Getting Stitches on a Cruise Ship, available now on Amazon. And I know that most of you watching this know all of that and also know that we have been in quarantine, or actually isolation. I did 6 cruises in 2021. I came back from each and every of these 6 cruises and was totally healthy. Then I went to Orlando. I went to Disney World. I went to Universal Studios one trip to Florida in 2021, and when I came back,
I had corona.
And especially over the last few days, as this period of time in isolation has come to an end, Marcus and I have, talked with a lot of people in our circle of friends, in our family, about the rules and what it's like. And one thing I've realized through talking with my family in the United States and talking with other people here in Germany is the rules are not only confusing, but also different. Different depending on where you are in Germany, and also totally different depending on where you are in the world. So I gathered a little bit of information, and I wanted to just go through it all to sort of compare the United States to Germany, to let you know about the different systems, the different rules and regulations, to let you know that if you're gonna test positive for corona, where it might be better to test positive or worse, depending on how you look at it. So many of these things are all depending on how you look at it. I know I've said this before, but I wanna make sure that you all know that I know that 14 days in this great apartment with somebody who's treating me very well was really not a big deal. There are other people who have a way more difficult time with this situation, and so the jokes that I make about what it was like to be sitting around here, please take them all with a grain of salt. There are people who have it way, way worse than I do, and I know that. And to tell you the truth, we got through this pretty well. And you have to remember, we've been together pretty much 24/7.
Since December 5th.
December 5th is when we started our trip to Florida. And with the exception of 2 times during that period, one where I went to Universal Studios for a half a day with my sister and her family, and a couple hours where I went out to eat with Tony from La Lido Loca, Marcus and I have been together every hour of every day, basically.
Since December 5th.
It's time for us to maybe just spend a couple hours apart. And I mean more than just like he's in the back room, I am in the front room. In fact, his birthday is coming up in a couple weeks, and we're talking about maybe doing something together for his birthday, but we're actually talking about also doing something separate for his birthday. Because at the moment, having a little space between each other would be a nice present that we can give our relationship. Isn't that weird? To be like, honey, if you want to do something nice for your birthday, let's get some space in between us for a couple days. And because I am not interested in booking a cruise and then having it be canceled, or flying to, having to test like 4 times to fly to Italy and get on a cruise. Sorry, I'm just not interested in doing that right now. Not before the end of January, let's put it that way. I'm thinking of going skiing. I'm thinking of going down to the Zugspitze, Garmisch-Partenkirchen in southern Germany to just go a couple days of skiing, get some nice fresh mountain air. And I just realized I've gone off on a huge tangent. All right, let me go through these documents that I have found online. One of them is from the cdc.gov website, and the other one is from the official Hamburg website. And disclaimer, this video is not a source of official information. Please, if you feel like you may have COVID, if you have tested positive for COVID, please go through all these things on your own. Talk to the officials, talk to your doctor, Don't watch this video and think,
okay, now I know everything.
I am going to try to go through everything, but I am not an official source of information. According to the CDC.gov website, if you test positive for COVID-19 and you had symptoms, you need to isolate for at least 5 days. So this is something that I also learned throughout this process. There's a difference between isolation and quarantine. From what I understand, quarantine is what you do when you think you might be sick, and isolate is what you do when you know you are sick. So Marcus and I we have not been in quarantine, we've been in isolation. But that doesn't mean that one is necessarily better than the other. What it also says on this website is to calculate your 5-day isolation period. Day 0 is the first day of symptoms, and then the next full day after you started feeling ill, that's day 1. It says right here, basically on the first paragraph, you can leave isolation after 5 full days. And that is way different than it is here in Germany. The stipulations here is if you are fever-free for 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medication and your other symptoms have improved, but it does say loss of taste and smell may persist for weeks or months after recovery and need not delay the end of isolation. So if you're feeling sick and you're starting to feel better and you have no fever for over 24 hours and it's been 5 full days since the first day you started to feel sick, according to the CDC, you can leave isolation. It does, however, say you should continue to wear a well-fitting mask around others at home and in public for 5 days, so it says days 6 through 10, after the end of your 5-day isolation period. If you're unable to wear a mask when around others, you should continue to isolate for 10 full days. It also says avoid people who are immunocompromised or at a high risk for at least 10 days. Here's another stipulation. It says, if you continue to have a fever or your other symptoms have not improved after 5 days of isolation, you should wait to end your isolation until you are fever-free for 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medication and your other symptoms have improved, and continue to wear a well-fitting mask around others at home. Contact your healthcare provider if you have questions. It also says, and this is, something that could be important for us as travelers, as cruisers, as people going to Disney or wherever, do not travel during your 5-day isolation period. After you end isolation, avoid travel until a full 10 days after your first day of symptoms. So if you're someplace other than home, this is going to be a problem. And this is also why you have to be really sure now when you're traveling that your travel insurance covers COVID, because most of them don't in just their basic policies. If you must travel on days 6 to 10, wear a well-fitting mask when you are around others for the entire duration of travel. If you're unable to wear a mask, you should not travel during the 10 days. The next thing is also something that's quite different. When we get to the German regulations, you're going to see a huge difference here. On the CDC website, it says if an individual has access to a test and wants to test, the best approach is to use an antigen test towards the end of the 5-day isolation period. Collect the test sample only if you are fever-free for 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medication and your other symptoms have improved. If your test result is positive, you should continue to isolate until day 10. If your test result is negative, you can end isolation, but continue to wear a well-fitting mask, etc., etc., etc. All right, so that's kind of like the rundown on how it is if you test positive in the United States. It says basically just about anybody can end isolation after 5 days, and you don't have to test yourself again. It's just you have to count how many days since the first full day of not feeling well, of any symptoms, and then you can leave isolation as long as you're feeling better and don't have a fever. If you're still feeling crappy, don't leave isolation. But I guess if you're feeling crappy, you're gonna wanna stay at home anyways, right? There is also a list here of what to do for people who tested positive but had no symptoms, but it's basically the same list. It's just a little bit more refined. The first thing it says here, if you continue to have no symptoms, you can end isolation after 5 days. And then it skips the other things about counting how many days from the symptoms and things like that. And it says the same thing about wearing well-fitting masks from day 6 until 10. Also, it goes on here, ending isolation for people who were severely ill. And of course, that's a whole different story. So I want to go through now and read to you what we had to go through here in Germany and how different it is. And I'm going to do it right after this commercial break. Did you get one? What was it about? Write it in the comments below. One really interesting thing to me is that after we tested positive in one of the test centers, somebody from the health department of Germany actually called us. They called Marcus a couple days before they called me, but you know, I still did get a call. I'm gonna be translating this from German into English, so forgive me if it sounds a little wonky. It says the following rules are true even if you don't get contacted by the health department. After you have produced a positive antigen test, you must immediately sign up for a PCR test at one of the centers. Until you have the results of this PCR test, you are required to go into quarantine, and we know quarantine is staying at home or staying in one place until you know if you're sick or not. It goes on to say people who have typical corona symptoms should first talk to their general practitioner and then book a test at one of these centers. It says after you have received a positive PCR test, you are required to go into isolation for 14 days. 14 days. If you are not vaccinated, this 14-day period cannot be shortened. That's the first thing that it says here. And I don't remember on the CDC website reading anything about a difference between people who are vaccinated and not vaccinated. That doesn't mean that it's not there, but I didn't read it on this page that I just went through with you. It is definitely on the German page of basically like the German CDC. Continuing on, what it says is people who are fully vaccinated or people who have recovered, who show no symptoms of a COVID infection can end the quarantine after 5 days if you can do a PCR test again and it's negative. Or after 7 days, you can test yourself at home, and if it's negative, you can also leave the quarantine. That is the isolation. That is if you are fully vaccinated or recovered and you have no symptoms. Really, the final thing on here then says for people who are not vaccinated or people with symptoms, the isolation is 14 days. So even if you just had symptoms on like 1 or 2 days and then 5 days later you're feeling fine, according to how I understand this to be formulated, if you've tested positive and you have any symptoms at all, it's 14 days and that's that. And when I talked with the person from the, Gesundheitsamt, that's like the Center for Disease Control here in Germany, or it's actually the health department. I asked him, so, you know, if we've been without symptoms and we're feeling fine and the 14 days are done, do we have to go to the test center to get tested again? And he said, no, it's basically on our system. We can do an at-home test. And if the at-home test is negative, then
Freedom!
So I am very happy to say that we made it through this. And isn't it interesting how different the two different countries are? Why is it okay to just stay in isolation for 5 days in the United States, but in Germany it's 14 days? Who's right? Which one of these is the proper way to do it? If it's different in your country, please let me know. If you don't live in the United States and don't live in Germany, how do they go about taking care of the isolation time when you test positive? Let me know in the comments below. And in just a few days, on Sunday, I will be back here in front of the red sofa for a totally normal Sunday sofa time where I'm gonna be talking about a ton of tasty food that we had at the Orlando theme parks. Don't come hungry, cause your tummy's gonna be grumbling. See you soon.